The custom data layer values feature is the most powerful feature within Listen Layer and exists across almost all of our listeners. Once this feature is enabled, you're able to write really advanced and powerful rules very simply inside of Listen Layer to push custom values into your data layer when certain activities occur. You can then capture that information inside of Google Tag Manager and power a full tracking framework, including adding information to your tracking as well as increasing your ability to segment information. So once the feature is turned on, you first need to make sure that you have some data layer variables defined at the global level. These are custom variables that you can write rules across all of your listeners to populate values for. So today we're going to focus on some of these variables like form category and potentially form name, and maybe even the user score change. And we're going to jump into custom values and begin to write a rule. Now, you can write a simple rule, which has the ability to layer on multiple conditions, but is much more simple than a lookup table. We're going to look at a lookup table today. And what we're going to do is we're going to categorize our forms so that we know which of those might be a demo form, which of them might be a content download form, which of them might be a support request form. Add a description and a name. And we're going to identify which fields we want to use for our conditions. Now, in this case, I want to categorize my gravity forms no matter what event is occurring, regardless of whether it's a form load, form submit, a step change, any of these elements. So rather than selecting all of them, I'm just going to actually leave that empty. And I'm just going to focus on variables. And in this case, I want to categorize all my forms. And I know I can identify forms using my form ID. So I'm going to select that. Now, this dropdown is a list of all the variables that Listen Layer has found in our gravity forms as it has generated data layers. And a list of all these can be found here in variable settings. And you can even drill in and look at those variables and rename them with friendly names to make them easier to find inside of Listen Layer. So once my conditions are met, I want to define values such as the form category. I might want to name my forms, and I'm going to assign a score. That way I want to change the user's overall engagement score. So now I have completed the settings for my table, and the system has taken me here to the table itself where I can add rows that define rules that can be met. And how this works is if this condition, or if I had selected multiple conditions, then multiple elements would appear on the left-hand side here. Once those are met, then we're going to push certain values into these variables in the data layer. And these rules are read from top to bottom. And once a match is found, it'll stop. And so one thing I like to do is usually I'll put a catch-all rule at the bottom. So I'm going to copy this wildcard catch-all. And I'm going to paste this in here and mark as regular expression. And this will make sense as we progress through this. So looking at my live website, I have two gravity forms. One of them is GF form 2, and the other one down here has an ID of GF form 4. We have GF form 2 and GF form 4. What I want to do is categorize this, and this lookup table can be very useful if you have many, many, many forms, but in this case, we only have 2 because we're looking at a simple example. And let's say that this form is a demo form. So all of my forms that are demo, I would put demo here. And this one might be a content download. And everything else is unknown, meaning, the system must be seeing a form ID that we haven't categorized. This might be my homepage demo. This might be my latest ebook. And in this case, it's more valuable for somebody to complete a demo than to request content download. And if it's an unknown form, I don't know how much I want to change the user score by. Now, also, if it's an unknown form, I don't know what the form name is. So in this case, I might just actually get the form ID itself and push that into the form name. And what that would allow me to do then is if I'm sending this data from my data layer into a tool like Google Analytics as an event, then I can go into Google Analytics periodically and I can drill into the event and I can find all of my unknown forms by ID since I don't have a name. And I can figure out, why is there no rules written for these? Did somebody perhaps create a new form that I wasn't aware of? Or did I just miss something in my original configuration? So we're going to save this table and we're going to go ahead and publish some values for gravity forms. I like to do a hard refresh here once the publishing occurs. And if you have the debugger on for Google Tag Manager, it's really nice because it can help you to see more easily what's going on in your data layer. But it can also delay the listen layer pushing the data into the data layer. So you might have to be patient if the debug view is on. But what we'll see is we have these GF form loaded, and all of a sudden in my custom values, I have information. And if we drill over in to GTM specifically, we can see that custom information here. Content, latest ebook, user score. Now I'm actually going to navigate to another form here. And this form I have not categorized because I didn't have the ID. So we should expect to see unknown and GF form 3 and a user score of 0. Now, any of this information can be captured and used in a very powerful way inside of Google Tag Manager. For example, let's submit this form here. And what we'll see is that in my form submission event, I'm going to have all that same information. The demo, the homepage, user score. And so let's say I want to use this form category information in Google Tag Manager. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the property path. And then in Tag Manager, I'm going to create a variable. And this is going to be a data layer variable because it's coming from my data layer. I'm going to give Google Tag Manager the path. And I can name it after the path, or I can shorten it, for example. I'm going to save that. We'll see if I can refresh my preview here. So what we can see now is I have a variable inside of Google Tag Manager called form category, and it has collected the information from this form. Now I haven't even submitted this form. The custom information is being pushed in also when the form loads. And remember when I was back here initially building my rule, I decided not to set a specific event. And that way this information would be pushed in. Now, if I did want to set a specific event, for example, maybe I only want it to happen on form submit, I can easily edit this rule. And now I would want to say, hey, I want my form submitted to always equal true. Otherwise, I don't want this information pushed into the data layer. Now, in this case, I wouldn't recommend that in this situation because generally, if we're categorizing our forms, no matter what the event is, we just want the category information to be on that form. So I'm not going to actually save that information. But the most important thing to note here is that once these details are available in Tag Manager as a variable, I can use this information to fire specific conversions or send specific event values into tools like Google Analytics, Google Ads, Facebook Ads. For example, when I fire a standard event into Facebook and I send information in, I might want to clarify this one is a demo form, this one is a content form. Or I might want to set up specific conversions inside of Google Ads to easily identify a demo form versus a content form. Of course, the demo form is more valuable, and that's why I would probably want to break out my conversion rates for demo form separately from the conversion rates that I may be calculating for content forms. Now, this is just one example of custom rules. You can create simple rules also, which by no means they're simple to set up and manage because they're not as large and complex as a lookup table, but you can still do some really advanced matching inside of the conditions. For example, we can have a single rule set and we can have another rule set, and we can target specific events and variables. And then based on those things, we can then push custom values into our data layer. This is by far the most powerful feature of Listen Layer. It allows you to fully customize and scale your web analytics tracking and solve a lot of problems without any programming or developer involvement. We're excited for you to dig into this feature and see what you can come up with.